Well, welcome everyone to Your Enneagram Coach, the podcast. We are so excited to have you on our podcast, but we're also excited to have our podcast now on YouTube. So definitely check us out there, like this video, and then subscribe to our channel for weekly episodes. Now today, we're going to dive into the amazing type of Type 9s, the Peaceful Accommodators. I'm a little biased there, right? This episode is going to give you a fuller understanding of the Type 9s and how you can apply our proprietary Enneagram concept, which we call Enneagram Internal Profile, or EIP for short.
Well, since EIP is brand new, we recognize that for many of you. Beth, can you give our audience just a quick overview of what EIP is?
Yeah, well, we developed EIP to help you understand and see that you are more than just your number or your main type. Now, your main type on the Enneagram is the driving force behind why you think, feel, and behave based on your main type's core motivations. But you're not just one type. There are many parts of your heart that are influencing you, and EIP addresses this. It also brings clarifying ideas and nuances to what's going on in your internal world. Now, you've already experienced this many times. You just may not have known it. So we will say things like, well, part of me wants to do this and part of me wants to do that, or I don't like that, but sometimes I do. And there's these competing thoughts and feelings and motivations that kind of happen inside us. And that's really what we're talking about. In Romans 7, Paul even describes the divided self when he says, I do not understand what I do. For what I want to do, I do not do. And what I do, I hate. So with EIP, you can better understand your inner world and bring God's truth and peace to all of these parts of your heart.
You know, I was even thinking about how parts of us show up. Maybe there's a part of you that shows up whenever you're thinking about parenting, or maybe whenever you're in conflict with your spouse. Another part of you shows up that maybe doesn't show up in other places, or who you become whenever you're at work versus who you are at home versus who you are at church. Well, the Enneagram helps us to map out all of our basic EIP parts, and we get to see how they're aligned or misaligned. We can access all of these various parts that are all the connecting types, both in healthy and unhealthy ways. So in total, there are actually 6 parts to each EIP. Today, we're going to be talking about Type 9's EIP. So as we jump in, Bethy, can you tell us how EIP what is it meant for you personally, and mapping out your own internal world?
Yeah, so when we talk about EIP, just to kind of, before I dive into how it's impacted me, we're talking about your main type is, reign supreme, the core motivations, but then you have these connecting parts of you, and those are the wings and the 2 numbers your lines and the symbol are connected to. And so for me, I remember you were doing some really good work, with a friend of yours, and you guys were talking about parts and all this stuff. And as a 9, the 9s have this internal fog. Like, I don't know what you're talking about, and I don't see these parts of me and what's going on. But then I had an aha moment, and I realized, these parts are my wings, and these parts are the 2 numbers I'm connected to in the Enneagram symbol, which is 6 and 3. And I could clearly then see how they show up both in healthy and unhealthy ways. And so for me, it's allowed me at different moments of each day to see when each part is showing up. So for instance, one time you and I and Libby were going to the airport, and I woke up late. Not you all, I did. And we had to get from Franklin, Tennessee to the airport, which is a good 30, 40 minutes, depending on the traffic. And this was 8 o'clock. So rush hour. And I was
Kids were going to school. We were hitting school zones. We were hitting rush hour on the small roads, even on the big highways.
And so I knew this is going to be tight. Like, are we going to make it? So my 9ness, which is typically like, it's going to be okay, it's going to be great, kind of laid back, was totally moving into that Type 6 space. And I was stressed. And so I was like anxious and worried. And I was thinking of all the possibilities that might happen. And I was getting kind of irritable and frustrated, really at you and Libby, and basically the whole world that was at a standstill, it felt like. And then I just had this aha moment like, oh, that is my 6 part that's showing up right now. And it's anxious and it's trying its best to help me in a very particular way to try to get there faster, which of course, that was helping us get there faster. It really wasn't. But that part really felt like, no, I've got to think of all the ways that this could, go wrong. And when I recognized, oh, that part of me is doing its thing, but it's not really beneficial to you and Libby, I was able to apologize and say, you know what, guys, I am so sorry. I'm the one that woke up late. We're heading rush hour. There's all these school zones and I'm acting all irritable and frustrated. And I'm really sorry. This has nothing to do with you. I'm going to try my best to press through and to just trust and be calm. But I just want you to know that I recognize this. And that was really big because it alleviated the pressure on you guys because, well, I mean, you knew that you weren't doing anything wrong, but there's always that feeling of, well, what can I do to fix this situation? And it allowed you guys to calm down and it reassured the situation. And it helped me just to really focus in on what could be possibly happening within inside myself that's not just the type 9, but what is showing up. And so that's what we're really going to be addressing. So when I started using EIP, it brought me even more clarity than I had before. So let's take a look at, just kind of what EIP is and what we're really talking about, especially from the type 9's perspective. But before we do, I want to kind of just recap a little bit about what type 9's are like. So type 9's are very easygoing. They're pleasant, calm. They accommodate. They don't have a lot of strong preferences, but they hide the fact that they want independence and autonomy. Basically, they don't want to be bothered because all they want is inner peace. I don't know if you know this, Jeff. Well, when life and people do interrupt that peaceful state, they will still try to accommodate to the best of their abilities to try to find some sort of peace and inner calm. If they can make everyone happy, then maybe everyone else will settle down and things will go back to the way they want it. That doesn't always necessarily happen the way we want, but we definitely want to avoid conflicts and any kind of discord. For us, our biggest thing is to suppress our anger and to go along to get along. So type 9's focus of attention is that peace of mind, to have environmental harmony, and to know that everyone is fine, happy, taken care of, and avoid all the demands that can be placed upon them. So they're going to really focus on making sure other people's agendas happen, because if they happen and therefore they're happy, then it feels like peace. Now, the strengths of the 9 is that they're very non-judgmental, they're accepting, easygoing, adaptable, and empathetic. And they can enjoy life, relax, and they're there to comfort others with their presence. Now, they're great mediators, and they're amazing in situations where there can be conflict. Not conflict at them, but there's conflict, and they'll bring others together. But they have some weaknesses. They can be very sensitive to criticism and anything that kind of just smells like they're being displeasing of any kind of tension that's going on. And they feel confused or unclear about their own desires, purpose, and calling. And this makes it really hard for them to take initiative and have discipline if they don't have a path for themselves. They'll just keep following everyone else and they'll numb out to anything that's overwhelming to them. But 9's are pretty spectacular when they're at their best. And I'll just name off a few.
That's funny.
Well, for 9's, when they take the time to honor themselves, they'll see that they have so much to offer the world. They'll become aware of their abilities and then pursue them, accomplishing great works, not only for themselves, but others. And instead of merging with others and people-pleasing, they're actually going to seek out the betterment of each other and themselves while pursuing God's calling on them.
Beth, when I think about the strengths of the 9, I think of both you as well as I think about my dad. He was a commercial electrician in Dallas. And a few things that come to mind is number one, their focused strength. And it doesn't they don't present with it. They don't necessarily lead with it, but you start to recognize it because and Beth, I think of your affection for elephants and the stories that you show me on Instagram about different elephants and how they move when you watch documentaries. One, they're incredibly loyal, but they're incredibly strong and they persevere. I've just seen Beth persevere through a lot of difficulty, particularly in the creation of your Enneagram coach and finding her own voice. Two, people respond to Nine's voices in wonderful ways because the Nines aren't trying to force or put their opinion upon other people. So whenever they do speak, it's very hospitable, it's very kind. People are very receptive to the Nine's advice. Just super incredible. I think even just a relational presence for my dad. Anytime I'm in the room and he's with a dog,
Right.
like the dogs just go sit with him.
Yeah.
Like
Or
Nines,
children.
that's right. They create safety just by their presence. It's not that they've done anything. It's just who they are, and their being is a peaceful presence for people.
Well, in type nines, we see all 9 type perspectives and we can understand where the people are coming from. And we have a very non judgmental, receptive personality style that makes people feel that we're very empathetic and can have sympathy for others, and then compassion, which is really what people are looking for. Can someone see me and understand me and actually move in and take care of me? And I think 9s are really excellent at that.
One of the interesting strengths of the 9 is their intuition. Beth will at times even feel something before I am aware that I am feeling it. Like we have a term, funkiness. And so sometimes when I get up in the morning, Beth's like, "Hey, you're kind of funky today."
Are you okay? What's going on?
Which, it could come across as a criticism, but the reality is that when it comes across from a 9 who really does have your best interest in mind and they really don't want to cause any disharmony in the relationship, it actually is a great invitation and wake-up call to our own hearts. So that really becomes a gift that a 9 has to offer people, is their intuition.
Well, and like we've always said, the core motivations are the driving force of our main type. So I just want to cover those real quickly because it's so important to recognize what type 9s are going after and avoiding. This is why they think, feel, and behave in their particular ways. And when we are talking about EIP and our parts, it's important to recognize that all of your parts are supporting your main type's core motivations. That's their primary focus. Now, each of your parts are trying to avoid your type's core fears and get your core desires and all of that. So here are the type 9's core motivations. Now, the type 9 fears conflict and tension and discord of all kinds, to be shut out, to be overlooked, and to lose connection and relationship with others. And what they desire is inner stability and peace of mind. Now, their core weakness is sloth. Now, this doesn't mean a physical laziness, even though we do love our cozy comforts, and we have plenty of stories about that, like me working from a hammock outside with 100-foot extension cord. But we won't get into that. So we do love our cozy comforts, but sloth, what it really means here is that we remain in this kind of unrealistic and idealistic world to try to keep the peace. So we remain easygoing, we don't want to disturb anything or be angry, and therefore we fall asleep to our own passions, abilities, needs, and just merge with others, hoping that that can keep the peace and harmony. But what we long to hear is to hear that your presence matters. And that sums up the core motivations, again, the driving force behind why us 9s think, feel, and behave in particular ways. And the rest of my parts are trying to support that, whether in healthy or unhealthy ways.
Well, the good news for the 9 is that Jesus uniquely speaks the truth of the gospel. So the gospel being like a prism to see things. And what particularly lands upon the 9's heart is that Jesus sees you. Not only does he see you, but he intends to use you as a type 9. That your very presence, even apart from your particular acts, is a gift to other people because it's a reminder of the peace that we have received in Christ. If you think of the biblical formula of we love because Christ loved us, we comfort because Christ comforted us, what 9s can offer is the peace that he offers, the peace that will last. The 9 can extend that to other people. They're actually an instrument of Christ's peace to others, to their communities.
So for us nines, just recognize that though you long to hear that your presence matters, the great news is Christ completely did that for you. He satisfied that because he left his throne to come to be born, to live a perfect life, to die on the cross, to bring intimate and to rise again, to bring intimate relationship back with you. He wants to be with you. He wants you to have peace, which we can't have on this side of heaven except through him. You mattered that much to him, but he also created you to be you. And we just love how we can see and use the Enneagram in such a way that helps us to understand how Christ satisfies our core longing, so we don't have to try to get it fulfilled anywhere else. We can stay there right with him.
Well, the next part that we want to talk about is the levels of alignment as it relates to being aligned or misaligned with each of our various EIP parts. Well, in the past that we've talked about a type being healthy or unhealthy, and we've referred to that as the levels of alignment with the gospel coming from Galatians chapter 2, where Paul says to Peter that you're no longer walking in line with the truth. Well, when we are aligned with God's truth, we operate it as his children. We no longer use the strategies that are available to us in our type and all the various parts to meet our needs and desires apart from Christ. Instead, we go to our Father who loves us and he provides for us and find that it's faith working itself out in love in our relationships. But when we're misaligned, we're operating out of our own strength. Then we're operating out of the flesh or the old self. That our minds and hearts wander away from believing what Christ has done for us and act more like orphans. We begin to think that we have to take care of ourselves and our own needs. And when you're out of alignment, we live as those orphans. We really do believe that we're alone, and we revert to strategies and ways of relating to ourselves and others that are based out of fear and loneliness and shame. And that ends up having an impact upon our relationships. Well, in EIP, we've simplified this a bit. Instead of 3 levels of alignment, we're now just referring to the parts of your main type aligning with either beloved or the wounded child. The beloved child is aligned with the truth of the gospel. It's acting out of what Christ has already done for us, knowing who and whose we are. The wounded child is the misaligned parts of our hearts that seek to live apart from God and apart from others. So Beth, why don't you start us off in talking about the type 9's wounded child?
Ooh, let's go there, right? Man, it's so personal. So as children, type 9s can feel and sense the energy in the room, the moods, and the well-being of their family. They have this intuition, and they can really feel any kind of tension and get overwhelmed by it all. They're just trying their best to create harmony and peace. And that could be by stepping in and trying to mediate. It could be withdrawing and like, I don't want to get involved. I don't want to create more discord. So they might withdraw, and they might merge with others to agree with whatever's happening just to keep the peace. Now, when there are tensions that arise, they might accommodate, withdraw, or totally disassociate and neglect their own needs in the moment. And so what you'll find is that type 9's wounded child part, they falsely believes that it is not okay to assert themselves or to think much of themselves because it longs to be noticed and appreciated, and it wants to be able to speak up and to go in its own path, but it doesn't believe that is even possible, which really makes me sad. I just kind of think about my own story, being the second born, 4 years younger than my brother, and just wanting to keep the peace, everyone. I just was always trying to find the way to please my older brother.
Well, and I was thinking of the drama of your brother's life and both the complexities of him being a stutterer, but also just being a very energetic kid. Like there was a lot of attention. Nines as kids can be missed because they don't want to add to the intensity for the sake of parents or for your brother who may have needed help. And so 9s will default to kind of fading into the background, and that becomes a pattern for them in adulthood. But what they long to be is to be seen and to be heard and to be drawn out for the gifting that they do have.
So true.
So a few ways in which the wounded child for type 9 may show up in someone's life. When they may be thinking things like, when everyone else is good and okay, then I can be okay. Or maybe to keep relationships peaceful and intact, I'm going to accommodate to their needs, desires, and agendas. I must maintain a gentle, humble, and peaceable demeanor,
Mm-hmm.
never boasting about themselves and or to think highly of themselves. These are all symptoms that they're in this wounded part of their heart is online. That actually, these are the very thoughts that prevent nines from actually moving into their lives with agency and with confidence.
Yeah, gosh, when you were reading those, I was like, yep, that is so true. Like, especially the last one, like, don't think too much of yourself or think highly of yourself or assert yourself. I mean, that is a common theme, which really kept me from starting anything close to your Enneagram coach for over a decade. And, it was really God's providence and Him, setting us up in the position we were with the people we knew, and then the financial circumstance we were in to get me going.
Mm-hmm.
But to think much of myself, to assert myself, felt like, no, if I do that, I'm going to cause some sort of tension or harm or conflict somewhere. And so we just want to fade into the background. And we start that even as a child. So the type nines feel very connected with both their parents, or at least they desire to. Not everyone has a good family for that to happen. But they look at their parents' desires and wishes and all these things, and they kind of bring it into themselves, and then it kind of floods them out. So they really don't know what they want, what their passions are. And so it's really important for parents and for those that are in a relationship with nines to draw out nines. It's going to take a long time. They're walking through a thick fog, people, so be patient. But to draw them out, what do you want? What are your desires? It may take some time, but they really will get there if someone is patient and affirming to them.
Well, and one other thing that I'm mindful of as you shared that, Bethy, was I remember in the development of your Enneagram coach, at the same time, I was developing a nonprofit called Restoring Peace, and I had been a mediator in the past and was going to move into doing mediations and pastoral counseling. Well, we were both doing it at the same time, and Beth, in preparing all the things that now have become so beneficial for thousands, millions of people, was really hard because there was a lot of energy behind it, a lot of passion, but Beth had to get clarity around it. And I remember her one day saying, like, you know what, let's just make your Enneagram coach and Restoring Peace, I'll just come under you.
Yeah.
Let's just do this together.
Right.
And as strong as a spouse needs to be who's married to a 9 to get them out and to show up, they also need to be just as strong on the boundary to encourage them on their path, because as they say about, I'm thinking of Star Wars, and that the force is strong with this one. The 9's accommodating spirit is strong, and
Yes.
it needs to be supportive. It's not like, letting them run into a brick wall of
Right.
unkindness. It still needs to be supportive, but to remind them of why they need to do this themselves and come alongside them and support them.
Yeah. That was hard, but it was also really, really good.
So whether you're married to a 9 or whether you're friends with a 9 or work with a 9, Beth, why don't you share ways that you have found to bring healing to your wounded child?
Yeah. Well, it's a long journey and it's still ongoing until we get to heaven. But the first thing is that we need to recognize that our wounded child has good and positive intent. It is trying to help us. It's not trying to harm us, but it's ill-equipped. It's a younger version of ourselves that's been harmed. And it only has so many strategies that it tries to use to help us. So we want to have compassion for it. We want to befriend it. And so one way that we can do that, if we so desire, is to name our wounded child and to acknowledge its presence and history in our life. Now, for me, I've named my wounded child Little Bethy because that's an endearing name that my father always, would call me, and that's what you call me. But
Not Little Bethy, but Bethy.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you call me Bethy. Little Bethy is the one that still was this vulnerable little girl who's just trying to keep the peace with all that was happening, and just trying her best to accommodate, to mediate, or just to withdraw, hoping not to bring on more frustration in any given circumstance. Well, you can name the variety of your parts, including your wounded child, in a way that honors them. Now, our parts can be both aligned and misaligned, so we're not just wanting to name them for the misaligned part of who they are, but choose a name that feels right to you. So again, for me, little Bethy makes total sense of this little girl that was hurting and just wanting peace and harmony around me.
And one of the significant things in bringing a name to these various parts of our hearts is the reality is that we can see them whenever they're active.
Yeah.
So in the moment, Beth can be adult Beth, coach, creator of your Enneagram coach, and she can feel the impact of little Bethy all at the same time. And her various parts, 8-wing, 1-wing, we're going to get into this in here in a little bit, but they will advocate on behalf of either the wounded or the beloved child. So being able to identify whenever that's online or active in your life, it helps you to differentiate from it and to be able to coach this parts of your heart. So Beth, let's go into the beloved child now. Tell us about the type 9 and their sense of beloved.
Yeah, so it's really important to see that, we have a wounded child part that is ill-equipped, but has positive intent, but their strategies harm us. But don't forget, we have a beloved child part, and this part knows who you are, and more importantly, whose you are. It's the spirit-led self, and it is fully seen by Christ, and it is never overlooked for the type 9. This part of you knows that no matter what, Jesus came to earth to guarantee that you would have perfect and peaceful relationship with him, which is so important. And he desires for you to live out in a sense of love and confidence, to know your viewpoints and your abilities, and to not hold them back. Don't hoard your blessings. And your beloved self knows this and wants to bless the world with the incredible gifts that we have, which are empathy, compassion, tenderness, peace, encouragement, and kindness to the world.
So a type 9's beloved child, similar to like the wounded child, they may be thinking things or doing things like similar to this. I bless the world when I show up fully and use my voice. I can be both confident and humble and direct, but also tender and kind. That God created the type 9s to be unique and to be a vital part of his unfolding purposes in the lives of other people. Bethy, why don't you elaborate on that? Because now you're in a radically different season than when you've been in the past, where you've kind of been quiet, reserved, hidden, and now, man, here you are doing a podcast and coaching thousands of coaches. What is it like to live from beloved?
Ooh, it's hard. It's hard work, and that's okay because it's hard for everybody to live in growth and in transformation to be more like Christ. But the good news is we're not alone. And so the beloved child knows this. The beloved child, part of our heart, knows that it's through Jesus Christ that we can live this out through his help, through the Holy Spirit. And so this is where what we call gospel self-talk comes in. And that's when we speak the truth to ourself, our wounded parts. So for instance, for the type 9, kind of like what you were saying, those phrases is when I feel like, who wants to listen to me? Like, well, I shouldn't show up. Or if you show up, everyone's going to think you're boasting or making a big deal. And the 9's like, no, I don't want to do that. And so my beloved self, which I call her Coach Beth, because Coach Beth will show up for everyone else in really amazing ways, but does she show up for herself? Still working on it. But when Coach Beth does, I can use gospel self-talk to help my wounded child, little Bethy, to know that her presence matters, that Christ is using her to help others around the world to experience a part of who he is, that is beautiful and glorious, a part of myself that brings people comfort and peace and ease. It brings gentleness. It brings tender confidence to the world that is strong.
Bethy, as you share, a thought comes to mind. I think in the last year, as we've continued to scale with your Enneagram coach and our own personal growth tied to how the organization grows, what's interesting for the 9 is that they battle with ambivalence regarding their voice. They want to be dismissive of their voice, but yet they want a voice.
Right.
So sometimes I'll experience Beth wanting to passionately speak and have something to say, and other times wanting to avoid it. But then there's this growing demand that as people listened to her, it almost was like a burden. Like I don't want to have to show up all the time.
Right.
I don't want that much voice in people's lives.
Well, 9s get overwhelmed really easily. And
So it's
so,
like, man, you guys are listening to me too much. Give me a break. But what happened, particularly as the founder of the company, is that how do you deal with the growing demand
yeah.
and feeling like you're the only one, but also this internal battle? Well, all of a sudden, Beth, I think it was intentional, and some of it was just kind of pleading mercy with God, like I can't do this. I'm going to need help.
Right.
But other people you'll notice have been on the podcast. Our coaching director, Adam Breckenridge, our community manager, Brian Lee. So as other voices are starting to bubble up in support of Beth, but that doesn't mean that Beth's losing her voice. It doesn't mean that Beth is delegating her voice. But what it does mean is that in the 9s community, that 9s can be strong enough to be a leader, but also foster other voices around them without losing their own.
Yeah. And that is really, I think, something that I really appreciate about being a type 9 is that I really do love seeing people blossom while at the same time living out my own passion. And that's really where Coach Beth can come online and do that, which is really a fun space to be in.
Mm-hmm. Well, next we're going to look at the type 9's wings. These are the 2 types on both the left and right side of each of your numbers. So this is going to be type 8 and type 1 for the type 9. Now, remember, the main type 9's core motivations will always be the controlling dominant factor. That's how they see the world. These connecting parts will bring other characteristics, both positive and negative, depending upon whether or not they're operating in the misaligned for the wounded child or aligned from the beloved child. And this is the key concept in understanding EIP correctly. Yeah. So let's start with the type 1 wing. Type 9s, their one wing, their one part is objective, detail-oriented, logical, serious, and more emotionally self-controlled. It focuses on improving the world and the lives of others by being fair and treating everyone equally with kindness and respect. And when their one part is misaligned, trying to protect the wounded child, you may notice a few things. First, you'll notice that one wing showing up when you're becoming passively aggressive, showing impatience, being judgmental, both maybe not in voice, but maybe in body language,
I don't know what you're talking about.
I thought because I was going to say a couple of ways that I see it showing up. And you know what? I'll let Beth share that if she wants to. They're going to struggle with self-condemnation and guilt. So the type 9's inner critic is typically that one part of their heart. Particularly if they feel like they're not making someone happy, they're going to be more critical of themselves. Like, that's why 9s sometimes think that their core longing or the core fear that they have is that they're not enough. And it's because of their one wing playing an unhealthy role. If you would just be better, there would be more peace.
Yeah. I mean, like for me, before you say the other stuff is if I was a good enough, whatever, wife, mom, coworker, boss, whatever you want to call it, then everyone would be happy. But if someone's upset or there's frustration or conflict or tension, it's like, oh, see, I'm not good enough. Like my inner critic comes at me more in that way.
Man, just hearing you say that is such a heavy burden of responsibility for everybody's emotion.
Because, think about it. You can't make anybody happy, no one, and yet we think we can make everybody happy, and therefore no one's ever happy, and therefore we're always never good and okay inside.
And then I think about a little girl handling that.
Yeah.
Carrying it. I can't solve my brother's problems. I can't solve my mom's problems, and being overwhelmed by it. We're still living this out, folks. Man, still living it out.
Welcome. But it's good. I mean, we want you guys to know that when we developed this over the last few years, this is how we use the Enneagram. This is how we see it. And it's truly been so helpful for us to recognize what is going on in my heart right now. And am I in a misalignment, not for the shame and self-condemnation, But for me to go, oh, I'm stuck again. Let me come back to Jesus. He will restore and renew me.
And we're going to get to this, but also the one wing will play very noble
Yeah.
roles in the life of the 9. So
Yeah, we'll
it will be a both and.
finish up our negative type 1 attributes.
That's right. And being misaligned when a 1 is working on behalf of their wounded child, they may feel internally conflicted about upholding and voicing their principles versus needing to maintain peace and harmony. Now, these are just some possible examples to get you thinking about how your type 1 wing shows up to protect your wounded child. And each 9 will be unique in how they utilize the various parts of their hearts. We talked through a few of these examples for wounded child, but Bethy, why don't you share about your 1 wing when it's aligned with the gospel and working from the beloved?
Yeah, so when the beloved part of myself comes online and my 1 shows up there, it's really amazing to watch because it's trusting the leadership of the beloved child, that the beloved child knows where we need to go and is bringing truth, and it's bringing healing and the gospel to my heart. And so what happens when this takes place, there's a few things that might pop up for you 9s or those that know 9s. These are some of the things that could pop up in a very healthy way, is that you might feel motivated to pursue your calling because you are being a good steward of what God has given you, the gifts, the talents that He has put before you. And you see that it's the right thing to do to pursue those gifts and to bless others. And you're an excellent mediator, and you want to focus on improving the lives of others by combining both principles and relational warmth. So that's really important. So you see the combination of relational warmth from the 9 and the principles from the 1. Now, you'll also want to use wisdom and bring in discernment so that you can create healthy boundaries so that you're not constantly merging with the next person or the next thing, but you're willing and able to stay independent yet warmly present. That's really key, so that you are you and they are them, and you are responsible for yourself and blessing others, but not that it's all up to you to merge and make everyone okay. So these are some of the really key things in recognizing when your 1 part might show up when it's following the lead of the beloved child.
So let's look at the 8 wing now. And here's some ways to recognize when a type 9's 8 wing may be activated. So type 9's, your 8 part is resourceful, driven, decisive, and it's a natural leader. That's right. 9s are natural leaders, and oftentimes they rely on either the principles, the principled life of the type 1, or the strength and directiveness and decisiveness of their 8 wing. And they lead by providing a protection, by providing a way and plowing a path on behalf of others. I mean, I think of what your situation, Beth, where you were able to put together a treasure trove of content on behalf of coaches, and now close to over 2,000 coaches in 30 plus countries. I mean, it is quite miraculous to even consider that, and that's in large part due to Beth's 8 wing showing up. They can show up with confidence to assert their kindness and generous hearts to benefit the world. So when your 8 wing is misaligned and trying to protect the wounded child, you're going to notice some radically different things.
What?
One, there's going to be a little bit more passive aggressiveness or stubbornness, irritability, and frustration. You're going to see particularly when they're overlooked, they're going to feel very frustrated, very angry. But that anger is going to come out in sideways. It's not going to be directed. It's going to end up coming out in other ways. They're going to struggle to stay tender and patient and gracious. They might, when they feel disrespected or bullied. That was a really big thing in parenting, particularly for Beth, is interpreting things as disrespect, both when it was actually disrespectful and how that would really activate your heart, but then also times where there's the potential of it where she felt overlooked.
Yeah.
Well, they're going to type 9s with their 8 wing when it's unhealthy might avoid vulnerability, fearing that others are going to take advantage of them or somehow manipulate them into accommodating and focusing on their agendas and desires versus the type 9s. These are all possible examples, and each type 9 is going to be totally unique, but we just want to give you some signs of when your 8 wing might come up. Beth, why don't you tell us a little bit about how your 8 wing shows up, both in when it's aligned with the wounded child or aligned with the beloved child?
Wow, how much time do we have? So, when I run in and I coach a lot of nines, what's interesting is I find that a lot of type nines only want to resonate with the type 1 wing, unless they are for sure and have clear type 8 tendencies. Because type 8s, for the average 9, scares 9s because 8s are the passionate protectors. They're the go-getters. They're willing to say it like it is. And 9s are like, oh, that's tension. I want peace and harmony. But the 8 has a valuable place in our lives to help us, but also it can derail us. So when I experience my type 8 in a way that is kind of following the wounded child, I definitely get more passive aggressive. I express my needs in ways that aren't always clear, and partly because they're not always clear to me. It's like this gut reaction. And so it kind of comes out with irritability, frustration. Now, the thing is if you say to a 9, like, why are you angry? What? I'm not angry. I'm frustrated. That's like a key, or I'm irritable. But underneath that is anger. And it's hard for them to admit that because that could create tension and conflict with that person or the person they're talking about. So I know that I can get defensive and very stubborn. And it's really hard, again, like it said, to be vulnerable. I'm so afraid of being blindsided or betrayed while giving my tender heart to someone else. But when the type 8 follows the beloved child, it has really helped me to have passion and confidence and assertiveness to create YEC and to bring on a team that I love and I want to support, and I want to move things down the path for all of us, not just our team, but everyone that's learning. And that 8 part of me gives me that strength and that confidence, the energy, the focus, the drive that my type 9 doesn't really have all on its own. So I'm very grateful for this healthy part of my heart that God has continued to foster and bring about more and more.
I mean, you really have broken through the ice, not only as an Enneagram teacher, but also as a Christian Enneagram teacher. I think too, being a female entrepreneur, I do believe there have actually been times where you've been overlooked as a thought
Sure.
leader because you're a woman,
Yeah.
and even because of your 9ness, that kind of gentleness, that
A lot of people
permissiveness.
say, oh, well, 9s can't be bosses or leaders of a company. And I'm like, yes, we can. That's the 8 coming out. Right, 8s?
Oh, that's so fun! See that little sassy, humble brag come out.
Yep. But it's true. I mean, yeah,
Funny.
we are going to, as 9s, we're going to have a lot of blind spots and weaknesses, but so do all the other types. But I will say, I am thankful and proud that God has given me the ability to foster a loving working environment with my team. I love them. I cherish them. Every one of them has a vital role, no matter where they are at in the org chart. All of them are valuable to me. They're all important. And I'll do anything to plow a path for them to make sure that they have great work and life balance, that they feel honored and seen. And I know you feel the same way. But I think a lot of people think, oh, well, 9 boss will be passive. But I'll tell you, if I think someone in my team is being overlooked or hurt or harmed or not affirmed, I am definitely going to step in. That 8 will come in and make sure that, no, that's not going to happen. So I'm really thankful for the 8 part of my heart that helps me to continue to push the passions that my 9 has of having peace and harmony in a business that's thriving to bless people around the world. So this is why EIP is so important, for us to see and honor all of the parts that God has given us, to recognize when they're not doing well and come alongside them and support them, but also when to honor and praise God for the great things that are coming when they are following the beloved child.
Well, the next thing that we want to do is that we're going to talk about the different paths now. Okay, so the 9 has 2 lines connecting with it. One, they have the connection to the type 6 and connection to the type 3. These are equally important as the wings, because these are resources. These are parts of you that either function out of a wounded child or on behalf of the beloved child that are more aligned with the truth of the gospel.
All right, so let's dive into the first path, which is your type 3 for us nines. So the nines are connected to both 3 and 9. So we really want to focus on just type 3 right now. Now, the type 3 part of our heart, just in general, is outgoing and affirming, friendly, self-assured, and they do not want to be seen as a failure or worthless for sure. And they support the main type with connecting with others and accomplishing things, and then shape-shifting to make sure that everything is going well, especially with others. Now, when our 3 part is misaligned and trying to protect our wounded child, what you're going to notice is that we're going to start ignoring our own emotions and identity and focus on achieving. And then we're also going to see like this shame welling up inside and kind of feel like we're a failure, we're not good enough, we're worthless. And that can really plague us in a big way. In fact, it can plague us so much that we withdraw. That's really what the 9 is doing, is withdrawing. Because if we don't feel like people see the good efforts we've put or it's not good enough, it's really hard for the type 9. We're very sensitive to that. But not only are we going to people please, but we're really trying to shape shift to maintain harmony that the 9 wants. So the type 3 gives us the ability to see, what does everyone need? What is the image? What is the way I need to talk to make others happy? And the wounded child's going to fall into that trap instead of being more of your authentic self and having healthy boundaries and being very happy and secure in the way God created you. So some of those are the ways that we're going to get into the misaligned path. But when we're following the aligned, beloved child, you'll notice different things. So your 3 part is going to take time to discover your desires and talents. So type 9s, I know you don't know yourselves very well, and it can be very hard because there's that internal fog, like I can't see it. But the type 3 is going to help you to find those passions, talents, and desires that God created you to do and to invest in and to develop. And it's also going to give you more confidence and energy to move forward so you can bless others in the unique way you can do it. And then you're going to work on being more authentic, developing healthy relationships, not only with others, but your own inner world. Yeah, so for me, the type 3 really shows up because the type 9, we can, like I said, get slothful, where if we're overwhelmed or we don't know what we want, we can kind of meander or just not show up. But the type 3 really helps me to have this assertiveness, this confidence, this go get 'em attitude. It will make lists and to-do lists. It will help me to have missions and goals.
Heather, do you think it's your type 3 part? Because one of the things that shows up in your leadership is that you don't want to be last minute. You don't want things to happen like the week of that we are releasing something. You want it done a month in advance, which is sort of interesting because the 9s can procrastinate until they have to get something done. But I see you functioning, and I'm wondering if it's your 3 part that's actually functioning of wanting to get it done sooner.
Yeah, because the 6 part of my heart, which we'll get into in a little bit, is worried that all the things won't happen. So let's plan and make sure we have a list and get it all done, because inevitably things do pop up. So why not have a little, flex time to get those hiccups, smoothed out? So part of that is the 3 wanting efficiency and to excel and to do well. And then the other part is the type 6, where it's just worried that, lots of things could happen. And I don't want to get stuck in that anxiety and worry and last minute. So it's a little bit of both. But yeah, the 3 will help me to see, and 3s are really great at this. They see the end, the goal that's over here, and then they work themselves backwards with a list and to-dos to make sure that they accomplish that. And so for me, that's what I love, is I really love knowing, okay, what is the goal for a family, for a business, and what are the steps that need to happen? And it helps me to keep on pace so that I don't start getting all anxious and flustered and all the other things that are from a misaligned part of my heart. So I'm trying to set myself up for my heart to be more aligned than to get trapped in misalignment.
One thing I also think of how your 3 shows up, and there is a sense that 3s they give a lot of focus to their image. Whereas 9s maybe don't give much attention to their physical presence or how they appear, they show up to other people. But it is interesting when it comes to your Enneagram coach, whether it's on social media, whether it be in events, like there really is a concern on how what our brand, how it looks on the outside to people.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. It's not so much coming from arrogance
Well,
or
it's not coming
vanity.
from-
It's about recognition. It's about, we want people to be assured, like, this is who we are. This is what you can expect from us. This is what makes it clearer for you to have a wow experience as our customer.
Yeah, so it's a blend of the 3 and the 9 together, which again, that's what we're talking about. These parts of us are supporting the ultimate core motivations of our main type. So my type 3 understands that doing things well, whether in branding or in wording or in creating courses, that doing it well with clarity is beneficial for others. And the 9 wants everyone to be able to have the same materials, to be equal with one another, that they can be blessed and move forward with progress, since the 3 wants that too. So it's the 2 of those types working together in a blend.
Well, why don't we talk about the type 6 part and how that functions for you?
You always love this part when... So Jeff's always like, you can't handle the type 6 space. That's my space. And I'm like, hey, that's fine. I'll let you have that space.
Beth can visit the neighborhood, but she can't live here.
I definitely, my mind starts racing. And
she's already feeling it right now.
I'm like, calm down, settle down. Yeah.
Oh, so fun.
Yeah. So the aligned part and the misaligned part of the type 6 shows up in a lot of different ways for the 9s. So we'll just kind of take, what is it like when the type 9 starts to use the misaligned parts of the type 6, that path that is connected to that type 6. Well, the type 6s are constantly scanning the horizon to see what negative outcomes might happen, especially worst case scenarios. Now, the 9 will get kind of caught up in that, but the 9s can really, they have almost a flywheel in their mind, and their mind is fast and it can keep up. The 9s, not so much. We can get overwhelmed, exhausted. We can have a lot of self-doubt, feels like kind of chaos in our mind. And ultimately, anxiety will start to rise and we want to just shut it all down. But in the meantime, before we shut it down, that's a type 9 defensive mechanism. The mind is just bristling with all the things that could happen. And you'll start to see the 6 get really agitated and fidgety. And sometimes because the 9 is from the gut center of the triads, it's more visceral than it is just head knowledge. Like we're feeling this internal tension and welling up of anxiety. And we really don't know what to do with it because we don't want it to come out, because that will bring discord and disruption. But we also kind of can't keep it inward. So you're going to see it kind of coming out with irritability, defensiveness, maybe kind of passive aggressive of all the things that might happen in a bad way. And so it's just interesting how the 9 reacts when all of the worst case scenarios and fears kind of come up. We also, in that space, will fear abandonment in the sense of conflict. You know, this conflict is going to arise and I've got to do everything possible to ward it off. So I know for me, with us and our family particularly, or even in our business, I'm constantly thinking of all the potential scenarios that could happen. Let's say if we're going to an event or out to dinner or whatever, what is going to help everything be happy and what could go wrong? And that 6 part of my heart is constantly thinking of everything that go wrong. And I'm thinking through, what do I need to do to prevent all of that from happening? And it's exhausting because there's so many possibilities. So if I'm in that kind of stressful place, that's where I'm going to go to. But the good news is when I'm aligned with the truth of the gospel and my beloved part is showing up, I'm going to be able to take my insecurities to God, and I'm going to trust that He brings the clarity and the strength for me to handle all of these different situations when they pop up. And not that that means that I don't have to, I'm going to stop thinking about all the ways that this could happen, but I'm going to be more at ease and at peace knowing that He is right there to help me. And I'm also going to still accommodate, but I'm going to be loyal and committed not only to others, but to myself as well. That's really important. The 6 gives us this amazing courage to push through and persevere through really hard times. That's what you guys are so incredible at. And for nines, a lot of times my first thought is, ooh, that's hard. I'm out. And it's like, no, persevere, stay in. And so the healthy part of 6 gives me that vision of moving forward. And then we demonstrate this courage towards others, bringing comfort to others in unfamiliar areas. So for me, you can see that my wings and paths for us nines are a great blessing, but also a liability. And it all depends on whether our heart is lining up with the misaligned, wounded child, or is it following the gospel-aligned, beloved child? These are so important for us to recognize.
Well, we can visualize all of these parts, and this is true of every EIP, that all of these parts being on a bus together. And for the type 9, whether or not the beloved child or the wounded child is in the driver's seat, that means that all the other various parts need to have their place on the bus. They all have a place to serve, but the question is, who's driving the bus? And, I actually drove a bus for a season
Right.
at the end of college. And whenever I had an assistant with me that would keep the kids all organized in the back, so we'd be headed in the right direction, we'd get there on time, versus a time whenever everything's just going crazy and maybe they're opening the emergency door in the back where things get dangerous. Well, the same can be true of our own internal families, our own internal teams. And so when our beloved child is driving the bus, everything is aligned. Our parts are aligned as well. But if our hearts are misaligned and are protective of the wounded child, you're going to find that a lot of things get disorganized, and you're going to see that in your relationships as it starts to spill over, and how your oneness can be critical of self or others. Your eightness could be strong and angry, but kind of lack focus. All of these things are the various team and resources that you have as a type 9 to be who God created you to be. And he's not afraid of it. He's not scared of it, but he knows that each of these are resources and strengths and opportunities for you as a type 9 to live out all he has made you to be.
Yeah. And I will say, keeping your beloved child in the driver's seat, man, that's hard work.
It is hard.
It's hard for all of us. It's hard for me as a 9 to not fall back asleep and just to go along to get along. And that's why we come back to God, knowing that he has redeemed us and he's continually restoring us. And he wants us to be aware of our inner world and to know all of these parts of our hearts, not for shame and self-condemnation and fear, but to help them to see that he has redeemed us and is restoring us and reconciling us to himself. So we really hope that you guys are enjoying learning more about EIP, Enneagram Internal Profile. And we hope that you will take the time to regularly do some internal practice, like maybe get a journal, write down your thoughts, opinions, and desires, type 9s, especially you, including when should you be saying no? And why is it so fearful to say no? And when do you get timid and you just kind of want to pull back? But also, where do the other parts of your heart, the type 3 and the 6, the 8 and the 1, when do they show up? And do they show up in misaligned ways or healthy ways? And make sure you honor both. You might be like, oh, I only see negative. No, that's not true. There's so much good inside of you. Now, if you need some help, we have great certified Enneagram coaches, and they would love to help guide you in taking this from your head to your heart so that you can experience real transformation. To get a very qualified coach, go to myenneagramcoach.com to find your coach. And don't forget that all of this is in our book, our new book coming out in September, More Than Your Number, and it's available for pre-order right now through Amazon.
You're going to want to check back in to our next episode talking about, because we're going to have a type 9 panel, a panel of people talking about their own type 9 EIPs. It's going to be super helpful if you are a 9 or if you love 9s or know friends who have 9s in their life. This is going to be an episode you're going to want to make sure you listen to.
Can't wait. Well, as always, remember that the Enneagram reveals your need for Jesus, not your need to work harder. It's the gospel that transforms us.
Thanks so much for joining us.